Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Switching from VMware to Open Source, where we'll talk about some of the options and have a general discussion. So it looks like most of you are already here, so I suppose we can go ahead and start. All right, so on today's agenda, we have virtualization infrastructure, virtualization platforms. We'll talk a little bit about proprietary platforms and, of course, open source platforms. A brief mention about StarWind vSAN for KVM. We'll also have a short live demo and a Q&A session. So, virtualization as a common management practice has been around for some time now, as you may well know, proving to be an increasingly useful tool that enterprises use to manage their IT infrastructure, reduce their physical imprint, and minimize costs. Virtualization allows you to make the most of your physical resources and run parallel isolated environments with different operating systems. It provides your infrastructure with quick disaster recovery options without having the need to rebuild an entire physical server from scratch, for instance. So far, the most popular virtualization technologies have been VMware's ESXi, Microsoft's Hyper-V, Oracle VM, and Citrix Zen Server, to mention a few. VMware is a particularly popular choice, with extensive support for guest operating systems such as Windows, Solaris, CentOS, and lots of other Linux distributions, as well as seamless integration between on-premises and cloud, automated capacity optimization, and resource distribution, as well as multiple other features. It all actually started in 2002 when VMware released the ESX Server 1.5, its first hypervisor, which was then installed bare metal and allowed you to run multiple operating systems as virtual machines from one physical instance. And then a year later, VMware would release the vCenter server, giving users the ability to centralize management of multiple ESXi hosts and implement live migration, otherwise known as vMotion. So thus came about the VMware vSphere kit that we all know today. Now, parallel to VMware developments, a number of open source platforms were also beginning to come about. And these are softwares such as OpenStack, Proxmox, Zen, KVM, Kubernetes, VirtualBox, etc. There are, of course, different types of virtualization, not without some overlap, such as network virtualization, application virtualization, server virtualization, storage virtualization, and desktop virtualization. Similarly, not all of these softwares are implemented on the same level. For instance, OpenStack is a cloud computing platform that lets you create and manage clouds, and from there, the resources of multiple virtual machines. Oracle's VirtualBox, for example, is actually a Type 2 hypervisor that requires an operating system to sit on. Now, KVM probably deserves a separate mention from this list. It was released in 2007 as part of the Linux operating system, and since then, any version of Linux, 2.6/20 or newer, has KVM embedded in it, which I think is quite convenient. Almost everyone has some form of the Linux distribution running in their environment. Now, KVM stands for Kernel Virtual Machine, and like VMware's ESXi, it's a Type 1 bare metal hypervisor that allows users to create isolated virtual environments on x86 hardware that supports virtualization. KVM can also technically function as a Type 2 hypervisor, but the drawback here is that it would be constricted to Linux-based operating systems. Now, if you are just in the process of rolling out your IT infrastructure, you might be wondering whether you should opt for a closed source virtualization software or perhaps opt for an open source one. Now, there are more than a dozen providers out there from each side. So how does one choose? Experienced users know that one of the main drawbacks of proprietary virtualization platforms such as VMware is the associated costs. Now, VMware's ESXi is a proven mature product that has been repeatedly tested. The vSphere is a practical, user-friendly tool that is especially appreciated by companies with numerous clusters and environments that require simultaneous management. VMware, however, is known to be expensive, and this may or may not be the reason why VMware has recently been getting more revenue from its other products, like its vSAN and NSX, as some virtualization seekers opt for ESXi alternatives. Another point worth considering with closed-source virtualization software is vendor lock-in. Now, this issue arises when it is too costly to switch your environment over to a different virtualization platform. Perhaps you may not have the expertise to migrate your environment, or it could be the case that the specific virtualization software you are running now has serious compatibility issues that make migration quite difficult. Perhaps you simply cannot afford the slightest downtime. Altogether, this prevents you from switching vendors, and you end up stuck with the one you initially signed up with. Now, if the vendor you subscribe to delivers continuously decreasing in value service, that is unfortunate. If the vendor suddenly goes out of business, well, the consequences here could potentially be disastrous. Furthermore, armed with the knowledge of vendor lock on behalf of their customers, closed-source virtualization providers may feel less inhibited when it comes to price hikes. In fact, there has been quite a bit of worry among current VMware clients after it was announced in May last year that Broadcom plans to acquire VMware for $61 billion. Now, it might simply seem as a somewhat harmless attempt to combine VMware's software with some of Broadcom's hardware into one nice bundle. Unfortunately, it should be noted that Broadcom's previous acquisitions have a dubious record, often involving price hikes and slow innovation. In fact, Broadcom has actually already made public its intention to run a cost reduction campaign regarding VMware, which will ultimately result in loss of professional staff, rigorous support, and R&D funding